As soon as the elevator doors opened, I felt something shift inside me, like a quiet tug from a part of my past I hadn't touched in years. My husband walked ahead of me, already complaining about the hallway lighting, while I moved more slowly, letting my eyes trace the old marble floor. It wasn't the kind of place he normally liked. He preferred sharp corners, glass walls, and modern spaces that announced themselves with cold confidence. But this building didn't care about impressing anyone. It simply existed, like a relic that refused to apologize for surviving. When the door to the apartment swung open, the first thing I noticed wasn't the space. It was the smell. A faint, almost disappearing hint of jasmine would drifted toward me, the kind only older homes carried, the kind that clung to memories long after people were gone. I froze for half a second, my breath caught between recognition and disbelief. My husband didn't notice. He stepped inside with a loud exhale and said it looked smaller than the pictures, as if the apartment were personally disrespecting him. I followed him in, but my eyes were everywhere at once. The carved wooden railing along the small staircase near the entryway was the first confirmation. My fingertips brushed the grooves without meaning to. I knew this pattern. Triangle, swirl, small dip. My grandmother used to trace it with me when I was little, telling me it was made by a craftsman who believed homes should tell stories through their details. I hadn't thought about that in years, but now the memory returned as if it had been waiting behind a door. My husband tossed his keys on the counter, if he already owned the place. "Why is this so cheap?" he muttered. "Foreign owners never understand the market. We could probably knock the price down even more." His voice echoed sharply against the walls, disrespectful in a way that made me stiffen. He didn't see what I saw. He didn't feel what I felt. To him, this was just another property he hoped to exploit. I moved toward the balcony, my heart beating in a strange rhythm. The sliding doors creaked the same way they had when I was a child. When I stepped outside, the city stretched before me in a familiar angle. Not just familiar, exact. I used to stand in this spot during summer visits, imagining the lights were stars waiting for me to grow up. The view hadn't changed. It was like time held its breath in this place. "Are you even listening?" My husband called out behind me, annoyed. "We need to ask about renovations. This layout is outdated. And look at that railing, who even keeps wooden details anymore?" He laughed, expecting me to join him. I did in single quotes T. Instead, I rested my hands on the balcony rail and let the wind push against my face. Every corner of the apartment whispered pieces of a life that had been taken from me too early, buried under years of silence, conflict, and loss. Yet here it was, waiting quietly, as if it had known I would eventually return. My husband walked over, lowering his voice like he was sharing a secret. "Don't say anything yet. Let me handle the negotiation. People like this owner fall for pressure. People like this owner." He had no idea. I nodded slowly, though not for his sake. Staying quiet was part of my plan, even if he misunderstood the reason. I stepped back inside, letting the jasmine air settle around me again, and glanced at the carved railing one more time. If only he knew why I brought him here. He didn't realize this apartment held pieces of my childhood, truths I had hidden for years and could no longer ignore. It was time to face them now. I didn't mean to slip into memory, but the apartment pulled me back as gently and as mercilessly as a tide dragging shoreline sand back into the sea. I stood in the living room, staring at the faded outline where a portrait once hung, and suddenly, it wasn't my husband talking in the background. It was another voice, softer, warmer, calling me by the childhood nickname no one uses anymore. I used to spend my summers here. Not just in this building, not just on this floor. In this apartment. Back then, the world felt smaller, safer, wrapped in the scent of jasmine wood and the slow rhythm of ceiling fans that hummed against the summer heat. My grandmother would open all the windows early in the morning so the breeze could brush the walls clean, as she used to say. I would run barefoot on the cold tiles, chasing sunbeams like they were living things. My mother would sit on the balcony, her feet propped on the lowest railing, sipping tea while clipping the ends of my hair. She'd tell me stories about the city below, the people, the lights, the secret quiet places only locals knew. I thought those summers would last forever. I thought we would last forever. Then came the year everything changed. My grandmother fell ill, and like vultures sensing weakness, my uncles descended. They had always been loud men with louder ambitions, the kind who measured success by how many properties they controlled. While my mother tended to my grandmother with tenderness that grew more desperate by the week, the men were busy flipping through documents, arguing behind closed doors, and whispering about what was fair. Fairness had nothing to do with it. The inheritance was supposed to be simple: the family home, the farm, and this apartment left in equal shares. But greed is a wildfire. Once it takes spark, it spreads faster than anyone expects. When my grandmother passed, the truth unraveled brutally. My uncles forced my mother out of every property, claiming she had no legal standing, that the signatures were unclear, that she was confused and emotional. They hired lawyers who twisted words until nothing made sense. My mother fought back, but grief had hollowed her, and they knew it. This apartment was the single thing my grandmother had tried to protect. Long ago, she quietly transferred it into another name, a name only she knew, a name she promised she would reveal in time. But time ran out. When my mother and I tried to prove our connection to the property, the documents were mysteriously missing. My uncles laughed at us, their voices dripping with the kind of cruelty only family can inflict. "It's imaginary," they said. "You're making stories. There's no apartment. Nothing belongs to you." Gaslighting so sharp it left scars that never healed. I remember the night my mother cried on our small rented bed, repeating over and over, "I know my mother left us something. I know it." And I believed her, not because of evidence there was none, but because truth leaves a different kind of imprint, the kind you feel in your bones. Years passed. The fight faded. Life moved forward, and I tucked those memories away like fragile glass wrapped in cloth. I couldn't bear to unpack them, not when everything about that time felt like betrayal wrapped in bureaucracy. But I never forgot. Not the carved railing pattern, not the jasmine scent, not the balcony view that felt like home. And when the listing for this apartment appeared online under foreign owner, priced strangely low, my heart recognized it before my eyes did. My husband thought I brought him here for a bargain. But I brought him here because this was the door my family tried to lock forever. And somehow, against every lie they told, it found its way back to me. My husband always claimed he loved me for my strength, but somewhere along the way I realized he preferred me quiet, especially when it came to my family. He loved the idea of being connected to them far more than he ever loved the truth about what they had done. It started subtly. A comment here, a joke, they're little things that were easy to brush off in the beginning. Whenever I tried to talk about the inheritance mess, he would sigh like I was dragging him into unnecessary drama. He'd say my grandmother was old-fashioned or too sentimental, as if the warmth she gave me was some kind of weakness. He even referred to her grief-ridden will as one of her emotional episodes, and something inside me tightened every time he said it. He wasn't there when we lost everything. He didn't see my mother crumble. So to him, the story was just that, a story, a little family fairy tale I refused to let go. But worse than his doubt was the way he seemed enchanted by my uncles. He loved how confidently they spoke, how they walked as if every hallway belonged to them. Whenever they invited us to a dinner or a gathering, his posture changed. He became eager, polished, leaning forward like a student waiting for praise. And they rewarded him with small scraps of approval, promises of introductions, vague mentions of business opportunities, compliments that glittered just enough to blind him. I remember one night particularly well. We were driving home from a dinner at my uncle's house, and he kept praising them, saying how impressive they were. I stayed quiet until he asked why I wasn't smiling. When I told him that the apartment we'd seen earlier was tied to the same men he admired so much, the ones who stole it from my mother, he brushed it off with a shrug. "Maybe your mom misunderstood things," he said. "You know how emotional women get when it comes to old memories. That sentence felt like a slap I wasn't meant to react to. He wasn't finished. He added, almost carelessly, besides, if your grandmother really left something behind, don't you think she would have made sure the paperwork existed? Real wealth doesn't disappear like that. Real wealth, not imaginary, not sentimental, not dependent on stories he didn't respect. It was the first time he'd said it aloud, that quiet disdain for the fact that I came from a family whose power never protected me, a family whose name carried weight, but whose affection never did. Over time, he started positioning himself closer to them than to me. He took their side during arguments he wasn't even present for years ago. He repeated their narratives word for word, like he'd been rehearsing. Your uncles are successful businessmen, he'd insist. Why would they need to cheat you? Maybe it was all a misunderstanding, but I could hear what he wasn't saying. Why would they cheat you when there was nothing worth cheating you out of? The more he saw my uncles as gateways to a better life, the more he saw my pain as an inconvenience, a hurdle standing between him and the network he desperately wanted to be part of. And every time he reminded me that I didn't really inherit anything, something inside me closed a little more, not because he said it, but because I could see the quiet satisfaction behind his words. A man who measured status by what someone had, not what they survived. I looked at him differently after that, not with anger, with clarity, because loyalty is easy when it costs nothing. His loyalty, like everything he reached for, was a matter of convenience, and he had just shown me who he would choose when the real test came. I waited until my husband stepped outside to take a call before I asked the agent if I could speak to the owner directly. He looked surprised, almost confused, but he made the call anyway. 10 minutes later, he handed me a phone and said, "She wants to talk to you." Alone, the voice on the other end was warm, trembling slightly with age, but unmistakably familiar. "Child, is it really you?" I froze. No one had called me child with that softness since my grandmother passed. I whispered, "Yes. But how do you?" A quiet chuckle answered me. "Your grandmother used to show me your little drawings. You don't recognize me, do you?" Then she told me her name, and suddenly the walls of the apartment felt like they were pressing in around me. I remembered her, a woman who used to visit my grandmother every spring, smelling of lavender and foreign spices, bringing gifts wrapped in colored paper. We called her Auntie Leela, though she wasn't family. She moved abroad when I was still a child, and over time, like so many things from those years, her presence faded into fragmented memory. I felt my throat tighten. "This is your apartment?" "No," she replied gently. "It is and always was your grandmother's. She just trusted it with me." Her words hit me with a force I wasn't prepared for. I sat down on the old carved railing, my grandmother's railing, and let the truth sink in. She explained everything slowly, as if untying a knot that had been pulled tight for years. When my uncles began circling the family properties like vultures, my grandmother grew scared, not of losing wealth, but of losing me to the consequences of their greed. She had one property she didn't want them to touch, so, in quiet defiance, she transferred the apartment into her closest friend's name, not legally hidden, but socially invisible. My uncles relied on intimidation, not thorough paperwork. "She always said you'd come back here someday," Auntie Leila said, and she told me, "If they ever try to erase her, make sure she has at least one place that's hers." I felt my eyes sting. My grandmother had fought for me in ways I hadn't even known. But why list it publicly now? I asked, wiping at tears that had already fallen. She sighed. "I'm old, sweetheart. I can't come back to Pakistan. My children want me near them. I could have transferred it quietly. But I needed to know one thing." "What?" "That you still remember, that you still care, that the girl your grandmother loved so fiercely wasn't lost to the world." I swallowed hard. "I never forgot her." "I know," she whispered. "I heard it in your voice the moment you picked up." Then her tone changed, slipping into something more alert, more aware. "Your agent told me your husband is with you." "Yes." "And your uncles. Do they know you're here?" "No, they don't even know the listing exists." "Good." A small, approving hum followed. Then we will do this the right way. You will pretend you are a regular buyer. No initials, no family connection, no hint of who you are. And we will see who tries to deceive you, overcharge you, manipulate you, or scare you away. My pulse quickened. You want to test them. I want to reveal them, she corrected. People show their true colors when they think you're powerless. Let them talk. Let them scheme. And when the time is right, we will show them the truth. I felt something rise in me, a mix of dread and long overdue validation. For years, I had been told I imagined the injustice. Now here was proof, suddenly breathing life into everything I had buried. But there was one thing I still didn't understand. Why give it to me now? Why not earlier? Because, she said softly, your grandmother wanted you to choose to return, not be summoned by obligation. She said, when she walks through that door again, it should be her heart that brings her, not desperation. My chest tightened. I looked around the apartment, the balcony, the sunlit corners, the faint scent of each jasmine wood, and I felt her. My grandmother, the woman who had never stopped protecting me. Auntie Leela spoke again, her voice trembling. She believed in your strength more than anyone else ever did. I want to honor that. The apartment is yours, my dear. But how you claim it, that will be your story, my story, not my uncle's, not my husband's, mine. I took a slow breath as I heard my husband returning, his footsteps echoing down the hallway. For the first time in years, I felt something shift, something electric with clarity and quiet determination. Before ending the call, she added, play along, child, and watch carefully. The people around you will reveal everything. When I hung up, my hand trembled not with fear, but with the weight of a truth finally unearthed. And as my husband re-entered the room, complaining about the heat and the cheap flooring, I felt something inside me settle with absolute certainty. They thought I was here as a buyer, but I was here as the rightful heir, and soon they would all know it. The moment we sat back down with the agent, my husband slipped into a version of himself I had seen before, but never fully understood. It always came out around people he thought he could dominate, service staff, distant relatives, anyone without a title or influence. Today, unfortunately, the mask was pointed directly at the apartment that once held my childhood summers. He leaned back in his chair, legs spread confidently, and said, so listen, this place is nice and all, but the price is way too high for something this old. I mean, look at the tiles. They're practically prehistoric. He laughed at his own joke, shaking his head dramatically as if the entire property was a charity case begging for rescue. The agent shifted uncomfortably. Sir, the price is already below market, considering the location. Below market? My husband scoffed. Come on. Who are you trying to fool? A foreign owner won't know the real rates. They probably just Googled something. I say we offer them something realistic, like 40% less. My stomach tightened. Not because he was bargaining, people negotiate all the time, but because of the way he said foreign owner, stretching the words like they were synonymous with gullible, foolish, and exploitable. I said nothing. This wasn't the moment to reveal anything. This was the moment to watch. He walked over to the railing, the one my grandmother had polished every summer, and tapped it harshly. Look at this. This wood is ancient. No modern buyer would accept this. Honestly, we'd have to tear half of this place down. My chest ached. My grandmother's hands had touched that railing. Her friend had guarded it for decades. And here he was, calling it worthless. He turned back with a salesman's grin. Trust me, sweetheart, this place has potential. We could renovate it properly, flip it for a good profit, make something real out of it. There it was, the weed that really meant him, the profit he had already begun calculating, the future he wanted, not with me, but using me. I watched him closely, quietly, the way Auntie Leela told me to. Let them reveal themselves. The agent tried to steer the conversation back to something neutral. Ma'am, what do you think? Do you like the apartment? My husband answered for me instantly. She doesn't know much about real estate. That's more my area. I'll handle the technical stuff. I felt my jaw tighten. He hadn't even looked at my face. He kept going, oblivious to the storm gathering behind my silence. Honestly, I'm doing the owner a favor bringing an offer at all. Foreigners, no offense, they panic Sal. They're just happy someone wants their old place. I felt something in me curl inward, not sadness anymore, but clarity. Sharp, defining clarity. This was a test, not of the apartment, of him, and he was failing beautifully. He turned to me then, finally acknowledging my presence. You agree, right? It's nothing special. We just need a good deal. And think of the impression it'll make when we sell it. You know how your family will react when they see us moving up. They'll finally respect us. Double quotes respect. That were the currency he chased constantly hung between us like a stain. He didn't want a home. He wanted leverage. He wanted to stand taller at dinners, bragging about a property he bullied his way into acquiring. And somehow, he still believed my family's approval was worth shaping our future around. The painful irony would have made me laugh if it didn't hurt so much. He didn't know this apartment was already mine in every way except on paper. He didn't know he was insulting someone who had protected me more fiercely than he ever did. He didn't know he was standing in a place built on love while speaking the language of greed. The agent looked at me gently. Ma'am, your opinion matters too. But my husband waved him off again. She'll agree with whatever makes the most financial sense. Trust me. And there it was, his true colors, spilled across the dusty patterned floor like oil. Not love, not partnership, not loyalty, just ambition wrapped in charm, threaded with entitlement. Inside, something shifted, not heartbreak, heart awakening. I suddenly saw every moment he dismissed my memories, every time he defended my uncles, every snide comment about my lack of real inheritance. He didn't choose me. He chose convenience. And as he confidently strutted around the apartment, pointing out flaws he planned to use against the supposed foreign owner, all I could think was, he has no idea who this place belongs to, and no idea who I am becoming. For the first time in a long time, I felt an unexpected, quiet power rising. Not revenge, not yet, but certainty, the kind that comes right before a storm breaks. I had stepped into the kitchen to grab a glass of water when my phone buzzed on the counter. I glanced at it, but the screen only showed my husband pacing near the balcony, his hand cupping his ear. A pang of unease hit me, the kind that whispers, something isn't right. I lingered silently, pretending to look at the appliances, until the words drifted across the room like smoke I couldn't ignore. I told you, Uncle, these foreign owners are clueless. Honestly, it's almost too easy. She doesn't even realize what she's selling, my husband said, voice low but brimming with pride. My chest tightened, my stomach turned cold. The tone of familiarity, the arrogance, the casual disrespect, it was unmistakable. He was calling my uncle, the one who had stolen everything from us years ago, the one who had laughed as our inheritance vanished like it never existed. I froze in place, gripping the counter, trying to steady my breathing. Every instinct screamed to confront him, to yell, to expose the plan before it could unfold. But another part, the part one had learned to trust, urged me to stay silent, to listen, to absorb, to understand exactly how deep this betrayal ran. Yes, I know she's the wife, but honestly, it's just a formality. I've got it under control. They won't suspect a thing, he continued, each word a dagger to the trust I once held. My uncle's voice crackled on the other end, sharp and calculating, clearly stirred by the information. Good, secure it. Don't let anyone else get a hint. If we play this right, it's ours before she even knows. I clenched my fists, nails biting into my palms, tasting metal and heat. The apartment that had been a memory, a sanctuary, a tether to my grandmother's protection, was now the focal point of another scheme. And this time, my husband was the betrayer, actively aiding the men who had stolen from us once before. I had always suspected his convenience loyalty, but hearing him orchestrate it aloud, it was a betrayal cut from ice. My mind raced. Every detail he revealed, the casual arrogance, the underestimation of the foreign owner, The plans to manipulate the negotiation painted a clear picture of his greed and moral bankruptcy. He was not here for me, or for any sense of home, or even for the apartment itself. He was here for status, for power, for the thrill of control. He wanted to play puppeteer, to take what was not his and claim it as a reflection of his own cleverness. And yet, in that moment of hurt and fury, a strange clarity settled over me. I realized that my silence was more than patience. It was a weapon. Every word I didn't speak, every step I allowed him to take, became ammunition for the inevitable reversal. I could see the path now. Let him reveal his own intentions fully. Let him expose himself to the world, and then act when the stakes were highest. Let him continue thinking he was in control, while I prepared to claim everything he was too blind to see as rightfully mine. I moved quietly back into the living room, letting the conversation continue without interruption. He laughed at something my uncle said, the sound bright and naive, as if he believed their plan was flawless. Each chuckle was a thread weaving the tapestry of their arrogance. I could almost see the map of their errors forming in my mind: the hubris, the greed, the predictable underestimation of me. It was poetic, in a dark, cruel way. When the call finally ended, he slipped the phone into his pocket, humming as if nothing had happened. I looked at him from across the room, my expression neutral, almost serene. I said nothing, not a word, and yet, inside, a storm of ideas and strategies swirled. I knew every move they would make next. I knew the exact moment I would turn the tables. In the quiet aftermath, I whispered to myself, letting the words carry the weight of every injustice I had endured. If they think they are clever, they have only underestimated me. Let them think they are winning. I will show them the truth. And with that, the first piece of the reversal began to take shape. Quiet, deliberate, and unstoppable. The day of signing arrived quietly, almost innocuously, but I felt the tension under the polished surface of the office like electricity crawling beneath the skin. My husband strutted ahead of me, confident and smug, clearly imagining how he would dominate the discussion, charm the agent, and negotiate the deal of the century. I trailed behind, calm, measured, my hands folded in front of me. I had been waiting for this moment for years, and every detail of it had been carefully calculated in my mind. The agent handed over the stack of papers, each page heavy with fine print, legalese, and signatures. My husband's eyes gleamed with anticipation, like a predator sizing up prey. He leaned close, whispering, "I've got this. Don't worry your pretty little head. I'll make sure we get the best price." I nodded politely, letting the words slide off me like water. Inside, I felt a smile tug at my lips, one of pure, quiet satisfaction. It was almost amusing, the way he assumed he was in control. That illusion would not last. I picked up the pen first. My hands didn't shake. My heart didn't race. Everything I had feared, every insecurity that had been planted in me by years of family betrayal, had crystallized into clarity. The signature I was about to place wasn't just on the papers, it was on the reclamation of a history that had been denied to me, a reclamation of the space that had once been stolen, and a statement that I was no longer powerless. I signed effortlessly, the pen gliding across each line with a fluidity that belied the storm building inside. My husband leaned closer, noticing my speed, and his brow furrowed in confusion. "Wait, you don't even have pre-approval, right? Where are you getting the funds? This isn't exactly small change." I looked at him, and my gaze was steady, unmoving. I didn't answer. My silence was deliberate, a sword hidden in plain sight. The questions, the stammering, the doubt, it all belonged to him now. He had spent years expecting me to be weak, to defer, to follow his lead. This was the moment he realized how wrong he had been. Across the table, the foreign owner watched me quietly, her thin hands resting atop the remaining documents. Her eyes, sharp and perceptive, met mine for a fraction of a second, and in that look, I understood everything: her trust, her approval, her recognition of the woman I had become. She had safeguarded this apartment for decades, waiting for the moment the rightful heir would claim it. And now, the moment was here. No one else would have understood the weight of these signatures. But she did. The agent cleared his throat nervously, as if sensing the shift in power. Everything looks in order. I just need the remaining signatures. My husband shuffled papers anxiously, finally speaking louder, almost panicked. I don't get it. Where did you take out a loan, a gift? How? I didn't respond. Silence was my weapon. A wall between his assumptions and my reality. He could see the transaction happening, but he had no idea that everything he had ever underestimated me, the quiet observations, the patience, the careful planning had led to this moment. The hidden savings from my grandmother, long withheld from the grasping hands of our relatives, had finally surfaced. They were enough, more than enough, and he would never see it coming. When the final page was signed, the foreign owner leaned back and gave me a small nod, almost imperceptible, but full of meaning. That single movement said more than any words could. This is yours. You have done what needed to be done. You are ready. My husband sank back in his chair, stunned. His face was a mixture of disbelief and indignation. The smug confidence he had worn like armor for weeks was gone. He looked from me to the papers, to the agent, to the foreign owner, as if the world had shifted under his feet, and for the first time, he realized he had no map for what was happening. And in that moment, with only my silent presence and the steady weight of my signature, I felt the first taste of triumph, calm, controlled, and utterly irreversible. I was reviewing the final documents with the agent when the first voices reached the lobby, sharp, demanding, full of entitlement. At first, I thought it was another group of buyers or someone asking about a different listing. But then I recognized the tone, arrogance, fury, and the unmistakable sound of people convinced the world owed them everything. My heart skipped a beat as the doors burst open. There they were, my uncle with his signature smuggler, my aunt clinging to his sense of righteous indignation, and my cousins trailing behind, mouths open as if the mere sight of me had physically insulted them. They marched forward, their footsteps echoing like a drumbeat of accusation, and before I could even respond, my uncle's voice cut through the air, loud and sharp. How dare you? You're trying to steal what belongs to our family. That apartment is part of the inheritance. You know it. You've gone behind everyone's back. I held my ground, breathing evenly, keeping my gaze forward, letting their fury roll over me without flinching. Every muscle in my body screamed to lunge, to yell, to defend myself. But I had learned the power of stillness, of silence. I had rehearsed this in my mind. Don't let them see your fear. Don't give them satisfaction. Let them unravel themselves. My aunt started in next, voice high and shrill, pointing a shaking finger in my direction. You think you can take what's ours? After everything, after the years of loyalty, the sacrifices, you're nothing but a liar. Her words were sharp, meant to wound, but I felt only the steady pulse of control beneath my skin. Cousins chimed in, echoing half-formed accusations, adding chaos to the storm. We trusted you. You betrayed the family. You're ruining everything our grandmother wanted. You're selfish and greedy. All the while, my husband's expression shifted from mild surprise to outright panic. His voice, when he finally spoke, betrayed the loyalty I had long suspected was convenience, not conviction. Wait, maybe you should just do the right thing, he said, hesitating as if he were unsure whether he even believed it himself. Cancel the deal, return it. You don't need to. His words trailed off, but the implication was clear. He was siding with them, eager to maintain favor with the family who had once dismissed me entirely. My chest tightened not with fear, but with the cold clarity of betrayal. I didn't answer him. I didn't need to. Every accusation, every demand, every flash of anger in their eyes was a confirmation of what I already knew. They were acting from greed and entitlement, not justice. And by siding with them, he had shown exactly whose side he truly belonged to. The lobby was now filled with the cacophony of my relatives, their voices bouncing off the marble floors, drawing curious glances from passersby. My uncle leaned forward, voice threatening, attempting to assert dominance. "You've no right to take this. It's ours by blood, by family tradition. You'll undo this transaction immediately." And still I remained calm. I watched their mouths move, their hands gesticulate, their faces flush with self-importance and fury. I let them believe their storm could shake me. Let them feel the illusion of power. In truth, they had no control here, not over the papers, not over the agent, not over the decision that had already been made. Every threat they threw only revealed their desperation, their inability to see the truth, that I had been the rightful heir all along. My husband fumbled, torn between loyalty to his family and his perception of me. He glanced at me, uncertain, clearly realizing too late that his convenience had placed him on the wrong side of the storm. I met his gaze once, and the calmness in my eyes said more than words ever could. I had anticipated this. I was ready, and as they raged, shouting and demanding, I stayed silent. A quiet smile tugged at the corner of my lips, the kind that promised not revenge, not yet, but the beginning of the reckoning they would never forget. The storm in the lobby was reaching a fever pitch when I finally decided to speak, though I kept my voice calm, almost measured, letting the words cut through the chaos like a blade. "Everyone, please listen," I said, holding up the stack of documents I had tucked inside my bag. The sudden pause startled them. Conversation stuttered. Eyes turned toward me, and even my husband froze mid-sentence, mouth slightly open, clearly unsure how to respond. "I signed the purchase hours ago," I continued, lifting the papers so everyone could see. "The apartment is officially registered in my name." My words hovered in the air, carrying the weight of certainty that none of them had anticipated. I let it settle, letting each person in the room process the statement before continuing. My uncle's face fell immediately. The confidence, the smug arrogance, the entitlement, all of it collapsed in an instant. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. My aunt clutched her pearls as if they could shield her from the sudden reality, while my cousin shuffled uneasily, realizing that the narrative they had relied on was crumbling before their eyes. I held up the next set of documents, flipping the top sheet to show the signatures. "These papers prove that the apartment has been held under the name of my grandmother's friend for decades. She was the rightful owner, protecting it from the very attempts at manipulation and fraud that you all orchestrated years ago." I paused to let the words sink in. The agent, who had been quietly watching the scene unfold, leaned in, clearly impressed by the clarity and preparedness of my evidence. A tall man stepped forward then, authoritative and composed. I recognized him immediately, the foreign owner's nephew, who had handled her affairs from abroad. His presence commanded attention. "What my aunt has done," he began, addressing the room with a controlled voice, "is entirely legal. She transferred the property to protect it from your previous attempts to seize it improperly. All documentation was meticulously prepared to prevent exactly the scenario you are now trying to enforce." My uncle sputtered, trying to interject, but the lawyer raised a hand. "No, listen carefully. Any claim you think you have is invalid. This property was intentionally kept away from your reach because of past fraudulent actions, which were documented at the time. It is now fully and legally in the possession of the rightful heir, in accordance with her grandmother's intentions." A stunned silence followed. The relatives looked at each other, eyes wide, mouths opening and closing as if their brains refused to process the truth. My aunt clutched her chest, whispering frantic accusations that went unheard over the heavy stillness. My cousins exchanged glances, some looking ashamed, others angry. But the sense of certainty had shifted completely. The power dynamic that had defined our interactions for years had evaporated in an instant. My husband's jaw dropped. I could see the recognition in his eyes, the realization that his assumptions, his ambition, his convenience, loyalty, had all been based on a false understanding. He opened his mouth, but no words came. His hand twitched toward the papers, as if reaching for control that was no longer there. I looked around the room, my voice steady now, resonating with the finality I had felt all day. "This apartment is mine, not yours, and it always was meant to be mine." Each syllable was deliberate, each pause reinforcing the weight of what I had just revealed. The law was on my side. My grandmother's intention was on my side. And the foreign owner's trust had guided me to this exact moment. Gasps and murmurs rose from the small crowd of onlookers in the lobby. A few whispered to each other, trying to make sense of what had happened. My uncle sank onto a nearby chair, burying his face in his hands. My aunt's face was pale, the shock turning slowly to anger, though there was nowhere to direct it. Even my cousins had no words, standing frozen as the legal reality cemented itself in front of them. The lawyer stepped forward, handing me a copy of the final registry as a formality. "Everything is now official," he said, nodding toward me. "There can be no dispute. The apartment has always been protected, and its transition to your name is lawful and irrevocable." I felt a quiet thrill of satisfaction, a sense of justice finally realized, tempered by the calm recognition that the first wave of triumph was complete. The apartment was mine, the truth had been revealed, and for the first time in years, I could see the devastation and disbelief on the faces of those who had tried to steal from me. And in that lobby, with every eye fixed on the documents and on me, the family realized what had been true all along. The apartment was no longer a memory of what was lost, it was a testament to what could never be taken. He stepped closer, his face pale, sweat glinting faintly on his temple, as if the shock of reality had physically shaken him. I could see the calculation flickering behind his eyes, a desperate scramble to find a way out of the corner he had put himself in. He wasn't just surprised, he was terrified. And for the first time that day, I didn't feel a trace of pity. Wait, just tell the lawyer we're a united couple," he said quickly, voice almost pleading. "That's all. Just say it's us, together, we've always been together. You know, I always believed you." His hands reached toward me, hesitating, then withdrawing as if even touching me carried risk. Every gesture was frantic, overcompensating, and utterly transparent. I didn't move. I didn't speak. Every instinct screamed to slap, to yell, to expose him the way he had exposed himself to my uncle and cousins earlier. But instead, I let the silence stretch, thick and sharp, like a blade hovering over him. Let him feel the weight of his own hypocrisy. Let him know that charm and quick apologies could no longer erase the years of self-serving loyalty and casual dismissal of my pain. You're going to ruin everything," he continued, voice trembling now. "I can help. We can fix this. Just say we're together like we always were. You don't need to." His sentences faltered, collapsing under the truth he refused to acknowledge. He wanted to rewrite history, bend the present to fit the image he had carefully crafted, the supportive husband, the wise counselor, the partner in triumph. None of it was real. I could see it, crystal clear, and the realization hit me like a cold wave. For the first time, I looked at him and truly saw him not the man I had loved, not the man I had trusted, not even the man I had allowed myself to hope would stand with me. I saw a man who measured worth by status and wealth, who aligned himself with those he believed could elevate him, and who abandoned empathy and loyalty whenever convenience dictated. I saw the reflection of all the compromises I had silently endured, the belittling comments, the jokes about my grandmother, the subtle siding with my family against me cast into sharp relief. Every kindness he had ever shown now felt like a calculated investment, a transaction designed to benefit him when it suited his interests. I could feel a storm rising inside me, anger, sorrow, betrayal, but it was accompanied by a piercing clarity. This was the man I had married. This was the man who had sat beside me through years of memory and pain, pretending to care while quietly tallying what he could gain from my connections, my history, my inheritance. And now, when faced with the undeniable truth of my agency and rightful claim, he scrambled to join the side he had always envied, not the side he had ever genuinely loved. I let him speak for a few more moments, fumbling, stammering, grasping at fragments of solidarity he had never earned. And then I spoke, my voice calm, deliberate, cutting through the panic like steel. "You always knew who you were, didn't you? And I finally see it too. I married someone who measures loyalty by opportunity, love by convenience, and marriage by status. His eyes widened, mouth opening as if to argue. But no words could counter that truth. It wasn't just a statement. It was a verdict. Years of quiet observation, of silent endurance, had distilled into this moment. And for the first time, he understood not through persuasion, not through charm, but through the stark, undeniable clarity of my perception exactly who he was. I stepped back slightly, letting the silence fill the space between us. The lobby, the agent, the lawyer, all witnesses to his unraveling, to the collapse of his facade. And inside me, something settled. Not relief, not joy, not vengeance yet, but a deep, unshakable clarity. I had loved the wrong man, and I would never be fooled or dependent again. The weight of the moment pressed in, thick and palpable. My husband's face still held the shadow of panic, his mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. My uncle's voice, hoarse with rage, was rising again, a chorus of entitlement and accusation. But I didn't respond. I had learned long ago that words could be cheap, that outrage could be loud, but hollow. Silence carefully measured, deliberate was far more cutting. I reached into my bag and pulled out the envelope I had kept hidden, the one I had prepared hours, days, even weeks ago. It was thin, unassuming, but inside were documents that would end our marriage, legally binding, precise, and irrevocable. I held it up just long enough for him to see, the paper catching the fluorescent light of the lobby, and then placed it gently on the desk in front of him. You chose your loyalty, I said softly, my voice carrying easily across the stunned room. So I'm choosing mine. The words were quiet, but they landed with the force of a hammer. Not a shout, not an accusation, not an explanation, just the infringing declaration of my boundaries, of my independence, of my refusal to be manipulated or deceived any longer. The reaction was instantaneous. My husband's jaw dropped, his hand twitching as if he wanted to snatch the papers back, to argue, to plead. My uncle tried to yell over me, his face red and veins pulsing in his temples. You can't do this. She's trying to steal from the family. Cancel this. The foreign owner's nephew, standing nearby, raised a hand with sharp authority. One more word of defamation in this lobby, he said, voice cold and precise, and we will pursue legal action. Do not test the law, nor your patience. His eyes met my uncle's, steady, unyielding, and the effect was immediate. The shouting faltered, the tension snapped taut like a string about to break. My husband's face twisted between disbelief and a faint, desperate hope that somehow he could still manipulate the outcome. But he couldn't, not anymore. The documents had already been signed, the transactions completed, the apartment registered in my name, and now the final severing of our marriage was just another formality waiting for recognition. I didn't add a single word beyond my first statement. I didn't justify, explain, or apologize. I let the silence stretch, thick and deliberate, watching as every person in the room, my husband, my uncle, my aunt, my cousins, was forced to confront the reality of their defeat. Silence, I realized, was sharper than accusation, cleaner than revenge, and far more devastating than any argument they could muster. The lobby seemed to hold its breath with me. The marble floors, the reflective glass, the onlookers who had gathered at the edges, all of it became a stage for the final assertion of control. I could feel the shift, a tangible recalibration of power. No words, no anger, no pleading could undo what had been quietly, meticulously prepared. My choice, my action, my boundary had landed like a gavel. He sat there, mouth slightly open, staring at the papers. My uncle and aunt exchanged helpless glances, realization dawning that every attempt to manipulate, intimidate, or guilt me had been anticipated and neutralized. My cousins shifted uneasily, some lowering their eyes, others bristling in vain. I took a breath, feeling the quiet pulse of victory, not the loud, dramatic kind, but the deep, irreversibly personal kind that comes from knowing you acted in complete alignment with your truth. The papers remained on the desk, my signature final and deliberate. I said nothing else. I didn't need to. The room itself seemed to absorb the message. My silence was deliberate, my power undeniable, and my choice irrevocable. And as I turned away, walking calmly toward the elevator, I felt a sense of clarity I hadn't known in years. The apartment was mine. The law was on my side. My family had been exposed, and my marriage, built on convenience and ambition rather than love, was finally, conclusively over. Silence, I realized, had said everything. The apartment was quiet now, emptied of the chaos, the shouting, the gasps, and the judgmental stares. The echo of the family storming the lobby had faded, replaced by a gentle, almost sacred stillness. I walked slowly through the rooms, each step carrying the weight of memory and reclamation. The air smelled faintly of the jasmine that had always lingered in this space, subtle but persistent, like a whisper of the past refusing to be forgotten. Every corner held echoes of my childhood summers. I ran my fingers along the carved railing of the staircase, remembering how my grandmother had shown me how to polish it, how she had told me, in her quiet way, that respect and care were the true measures of worth. I paused on the balcony, gazing out at the view she had adored, the way the afternoon sun would spill across the rooftops, painting them gold and warm, just like she had always described in her stories. I could almost hear her laughter, soft and full of joy, filling the empty space with a presence I hadn't realized I'd been craving for so long. I moved into the living room, brushing my hand over the worn edges of the window sills, the corners that bore the marks of years and history. Every imperfection felt like a memory preserved, a testament to survival, to endurance, to the love that had been here long before greed and betrayal had entered the picture. I paused in front of the fireplace, my gaze drawn instinctively to the mantel. From my bag, I carefully lifted a framed photograph of my grandmother. Her eyes, warm and sharp, seemed to follow me as I set the frame down. It was a small gesture, almost inconsequential in the grand scale of events, yet profoundly significant. Placing her photo there was more than decoration. It was an acknowledgement, a ritual, a silent promise that this home, this sanctuary, was once again a place of care, memory, and respect. I lingered for a long moment, tracing the edges of the frame with my fingertips, the weight of the recent confrontations, the betrayal of my husband, the relentless attempts of my uncle and family to claim what was never theirs. All of it felt distant, like a storm I had weathered and survived. And now, in this space reclaimed and quiet, I could breathe fully, without calculation, without vigilance. I could exist simply as the person I had always been, free of expectation, of manipulation, of judgment. Walking through the kitchen, the bedrooms, the living spaces, I felt a gentle pride swell in my chest. This apartment, once a symbol of loss and stolen inheritance, had transformed into a living testament to resilience and justice. The apartment was mine not through revenge or confrontation alone, but through patience, strategy, and unwavering belief in what was rightfully mine. I had honored my grandmother, preserved her intentions, and in doing so, claimed a part of my own story that had long been denied. Sitting for a moment on the edge of the sofa, I let my hands rest in my lap and closed my eyes. The sun filtered through the windows, casting soft light across the floor, across the walls, across the moments I had cherished in secrecy all these years. I felt her presence not as a shadow, but as a guiding warmth reminding me that home is not just a space, but a feeling nurtured by love, memory, and care. And as I opened my eyes and glanced around, I realized something profound. This apartment was no longer merely a building, no longer a battlefield for family greed. It had become my home again, a place of healing, of quiet victory, and of deep, personal justice. The past was acknowledged, the present reclaimed, and for the first time in years, I felt a soft, enduring sense of closure settle around me like a warm embrace. The apartment had finally quieted into a kind of peace, a calm that only comes after storms of betrayal and vindication. I wandered toward the study, where the tall bookshelf had always stood, heavy and slightly leaning from years of use. My fingers traced the edges, lingering over the familiar grooves and scratches, when something unusual caught my attention. A small draft of air behind the shelf, a space that had always been there but never revealed itself before. Curiosity pricked at me, insistent and gentle, and I moved the shelf slightly aside. There it was, a small, sealed envelope, yellowed at the edges, taped to the back of the wall as if it had been waiting for me all these years. My heart thumped in my chest as I carefully pulled it down, the paper fragile under my fingertips. The envelope bore my grandmother's handwriting, unmistakable in its elegance, and my name written clearly across the front. A lump formed in my throat. My grandmother, who had orchestrated so many of the safeguards in my life, had left me one final message. I slid a finger under the flap and slowly opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper, the handwriting neat, but bearing a weight that seemed to press from the page itself. I unfolded it and began to read, each word hitting me like a heartbeat echoing from the past. My dear child, it began. If you are reading this, you have discovered what I have long hoped you would. The apartment, the house, the little spaces that have survived years of greed and ambition, they were meant to protect you. I hid them because the world was not ready to recognize the value of a child's inheritance when so many adult hands reached for what was not theirs to take. Tears blurred my vision as I continued. The letter spoke of the betrayal my family had orchestrated, of the manipulations and falsehoods that had forced me and my mother into silence. My grandmother wrote of the friend who had safeguarded the apartment, the reason it was held under a foreign name, and the care with which she had ensured it would reach me only when I was ready, only when I could claim it with both justice and clarity. You deserve a future free from greedy hands, free from manipulation, free from those who mistake convenience for loyalty. I trusted you to reclaim what is yours, to act with patience, courage, and wisdom. Know that every challenge you face, every obstacle placed in your path by those who seek to diminish you, was part of the plan for you to discover your strength. You are worthy, capable, and deserving of safety and dignity. And now, my dear, it is your time. I pressed the letter to my chest, letting the words sink in slowly. My grandmother's voice, so clear in her careful phrasing, seemed to fill the room round me. I could almost hear her whispering beside me, guiding me, acknowledging the battles I had fought, the betrayals I had endured, and the victories I had claimed. Every injustice, every sneer, every manipulative word from my family now felt small against the depth of her foresight and love. I sank to the floor, leaning against the bookshelf, cradling the letter like a talisman. The apartment was no longer just a reclaimed space, no longer just a victory over greed and manipulation. It was a testament to generations of care, to foresight, to the quiet, deliberate love that had protected me even when I had not known I needed protection. And in that moment, as I read and reread her words, I felt an unexpected fullness or completion that was more than legal, more than strategic, more than any revenge could provide. My grandmother had left me not just a home, but a legacy of dignity, wisdom, and unshakable love. The apartment was mine, yes, but the letter was proof that my life, my safety, and my worth had been preserved all along. Clutching it close, I whispered into the empty room, "I understand now, Grandma. I understand everything." And for the first time, I felt entirely, beautifully, irrevocably whole. The apartment felt alive in a way it never had before, not with noise, not with argument, not with the sharp edges of betrayal, but with the soft pulse of belonging. I had spent the afternoon arranging the furniture, placing little touches that reminded me of my grandmother, and settling into the rhythm of ownership that was mine by right. Patience and careful strategy. The sun slanted through the windows, casting long golden patterns across the hardwood floors, and for the first time in years, the air felt like it belonged to me alone. I made tea and carried it to the small balcony, letting the warmth seep into my hands as I listened to the quiet hum of the city below. A few neighbors waved, familiar faces who had watched the building shift over decades. One of them leaned slightly over the fence and whispered, "Your family was shouting out here earlier." Your uncle looked, well, desperate. I smiled, keeping the calm, composed exterior I had honed over years of being underestimated. There was no need for explanation. My silence had done its work. The apartment, the law, the letter, the strategy, all of it had spoken louder than any words could. I stepped inside, moving slowly through the rooms. Each space seemed to breathe with me, carrying the echoes of my grandmother's voice, her laughter, her lessons, and the careful love she had tucked into every corner. This was no longer just bricks and walls. It was safety. It was justice. It was home. My fingers brushed over the carved railing, lingered on the mantel, and rested on the framed photograph of my grandmother. And a quiet gratitude swelled inside me. Every battle, every betrayal, every quiet act of patience had led to this, a sanctuary of my own making. I poured the tea into a delicate cup, holding it in both hands as I walked toward the living room window. The street below was calm, yet I could still imagine the chaos of my uncle and cousins, their faces flushed with rage and disbelief. He had tried to reclaim control, tried to assert dominance, tried to make the world bend to his greed. But the moment had passed. My silence, my patience, my careful planning had turned the tables completely. And now, all that remained was the quiet, inevitable satisfaction of truth standing alone, unshakable and undeniable. Sitting down on the sofa, I cradled the cup, watching the city bathe in the soft glow of evening. I thought back over the months, the apartment discovery, the revelations with the foreign owner, my husband's betrayal, the confrontation in the lobby, the legal triumphs, the letter hidden in the wall, and felt a deep, resonant peace. Each step had required restraint, observation, and strategy. Each victory had been quiet, deliberate, and entirely mine. And in the silence, I understood the full power of what had been accomplished. Vindication didn't always need loud declarations. Revenge didn't always require spectacle. Justice could arrive softly, measured, and irrevocably, without the need for applause or recognition. The apartment had become a symbol, not just of inheritance, but of resilience, clarity, and the quiet strength to let the truth speak for itself. I placed the tea on the table and leaned back, closing my eyes for a moment, letting the peace settle into my bones. My grandmother's voice seemed to whisper around me, approving, serene, proud. And I knew I had honored her legacy not through confrontation, not through rage, but through careful, unshakable composure. Opening my eyes, I looked around the room, the mantel, the bookshelves, the soft light falling across the floor, and whispered to myself. I stayed silent, not because I was weak, but because the truth needed space to speak for itself. A quiet smile touched my lips, unguarded, genuine. The apartment was mine. The battle was over. And in the stillness of that evening, I felt something that had been denied to me for far too long. The unshakable satisfaction of justice fully realized, and the serene triumph of victory spoken in silence.